I am Nitin Bhandari. I am co-founder and CEO of Planera, and I am a third-time entrepreneur. I have an engineering degree from Caltech as part of my professional training, but then I have started two other companies in the past. Both grew well and found good exits, but this is the one that I'm most excited about because it's helping modernize one of the most important industries uh, in the modern economy, which is construction, right? It just touches so many things, and Planera is not just modernizing it, but making it more efficient.
A little bit more about why you're so excited about this particular one.
It sits in the intersection of a number of things that are very, very important, right? One is, as I said, construction is such a large part of our GDP, and it's still sort of running in using some old software. Many places in the construction industry software stack, so to speak, have been modernized with Procore and Autodesk doing a great job in many aspects of it. But then there are some very important things like scheduling and planning, which are still running on really, really old software. And my co-founder comes from the civil engineering background. He runs a heavy civil engineering company. And I saw him and his company struggle with this problem. And they're not unique. Even the largest companies in the world are struggling with this problem of how do we empower project teams to make good schedules, good plans, react to uncertainties. And so it's a big problem, but also the impact of doing it right is so huge, right? If we can just make the entire sector a few percentage points more efficient, right? That's like tens of billions of dollars, if not hundreds of billions of dollars that can go back into the economy to do other productive things, right? Imagine the kind of stuff, greater good we can do for society by saving tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, right? That's kind of what gets me excited personally about modernizing construction.
Okay, that sounds great. So I read that Planera is described as a construction critical path method, CPM, scheduling and planning solution. Can you elaborate on what that means, especially the CPM part?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. We generally don't try to use too much jargon, but this is the only jargon we use is CPM, critical path method. The reason is, if you think of planning, there's two types of planning. In software, in tech, it's often considered agile planning, right? You make up a plan and then tomorrow you can change it and you can do this before that, or you can do it in reverse order and things like that. And it works, right? Because we're not working with physical structures. In construction, you have to be extremely very thought out because laws of physics apply, right? You have to do certain things in certain order. You have some flexibility, but often not 100% flexibility. So for that, there is a very well-known method called critical path method, where you define the network. You say, I must do this before I can do this, this, and this, and then blah, so on and so forth. And then from that comes a schedule. But in the schedule, there might be many, many paths, so to speak, right? Things that are happening in parallel. One of them is what's called the critical path. That's the path that is the longest path, and any day, 1 day of slip there will mean 1 day of slip in the end date. And so while everything is important, critical path of a schedule is extremely important, a whole lot more important than other paths, right? And so that's what critical path method means, is that you do the entire plan, but then you analyze the most critical path and maybe 2 or 3 under it a lot more carefully than something that has no impact to the end date, right? Which is important, but not critical.
How is the CPM then decided? Who decides? Is that the engineers figuring out what is the critical path, or is that something that the technology does for them?
Yeah, so they just say, this is how I envision the project unfolding, and then the technology reveals to them what the critical path is, and then we allow them to do a lot of what if scenarios. Oh, okay, I don't like the end date. Now, I know the physical constraints because I'm the engineer, right? So let me say, hey, what if I do this before this? And then the software tells them the impact of it, right? And so we allow them to do a lot of experimentation, a lot of analysis, what if analysis, and in a way that's super easy to do, right? So they all understand inherently that they should be doing it, but the current tools are too complex, right? So they don't do it. What we do is we make it super easy for them to understand where their criticality is, and then do a lot of what ifs. And hey, what if I did this before that? They cannot have 100% flexibility, as I said. Laws of physics apply, but there's a lot of creativity there that engineers can have, or superintendents. They often want to analyze the job 8 or 10 different ways. Current tools don't allow them to do that, and Planera does.
Okay, so as it's providing all these different variations and options, each one of those still has to follow the critical path, so that doesn't get altered, and they just everything else is what's the variations is around that CPM.
No, the critical path might get altered in each variation, and they can compare it, and then they can say, yeah, this is the one I like most, and its critical path is 100 days shorter than so you might start with 600-day schedule or 400-day schedule, and you might be like, hey, with this variation, it became 420, but with this other variation, it became 360. And I still think I have enough equipment and labor, and there's a lot of things they have to analyze, right? Do I have all the heavy equipment for this, that? And so each version will have its own critical path. And then they'll be like, this is the one I like the most, right? Because it's the right balance between duration and labor usage and equipment and availability and all of that stuff, right? So there's a lot of complicated things they have to analyze, which you can't do unless you have powerful software.
Okay, so the CPM isn't rigid either. It's just kind of the foundation for the variations. Is that correct?
That's right. Every variation will have its own critical path, which will be different from variation to variation. And then you pick with the one that you want to commit to.
Has scheduling been an underappreciated and underestimated part of engineering and construction, and why?
I think it is the last very important thing that has not been modernized. It's extremely appreciate. Well, I don't think that the practitioners underappreciate it. They understand how important it is. It's just that the industry hasn't given them the right tools for it. And the why of it is that it often became like one of these complex things that ran on like these really complex software, and only a handful of people in a company kind of could do it. Even in large companies, ENR top 10, top 20, we have a bunch of customers who are like top 20. They would like 30 people to touch the schedule in the project team, but only one person knows how to use the software, right? And so it just always becomes like this thing that one person does, right? And so it's not underappreciated in the sense that people understand the value of it. It's underappreciated in the sense that not enough people touch the schedule, and they should, because they know how to build the job. What we're doing is, we like to call it democratizing scheduling, right? We are making it accessible to the whole project team without dumbing it down, right? In the past, some approaches have been, hey, we'll make it easy for everyone to use, but in the process, we'll also make it really, really dumb, right? Like it won't have all this advanced capability because it's too hard, right? And what our approach has been that we need to empower the whole project team to be able to interact with the schedule, to be able to optimize the schedule without dumbing it down. Does that kind of answer your question,
Yeah,
Todd?
I think so. Could you maybe get a little more specific on how Planera is democratizing it, and perhaps like a workflow, so that explain a little bit more about how many people, the types of people that you want, you say touching the schedule, and how Planera is making that easier and more effective.
In a typical project, for instance, there could be 6 to 10 people who have some aspect of the project in their mind, right? Like I'm the head of MEP, I'm a head of this, I'm marine construction. General superintendent obviously understands everything. Project manager understands all aspects of it. They all have something to contribute. What Planera does is, number one, it makes it really intuitive and easy for them. So traditional scheduling has been done using this Gantt chart method. You draw a bunch of write activities and draw Gantt chart. We have that. Gantt charts are important. And are you familiar with the term Gantt chart? Where
yes.
There's these bars,
the boxes and the arrows.
Right. What we did is we introduced another way for people to interact with the schedule, which is a whiteboard. Every construction individual understands whiteboard. That's how they learn scheduling in college, in universities, right? And so we give them a digital whiteboard where they could just draw a logical block diagram, and we automatically create the Gantt chart and the table and all those difficult, clunky things, the software takes care of it, right? And so first, now suddenly everyone's like in a creative frame of mind. Everyone knows how to draw block diagrams on a whiteboard. Then what we do is we allow them to invite all these other stakeholders right into the project file, right? With different permissions. So think of it like collaborating on a Google Doc or a SharePoint document, right? Where you can see each other's cursors, you can collaboratively work, but we're keeping track of all the changes, right? So there's sort of this auditability in the back end, but essentially all 5, 6, 10 people are collaboratively building the schedule, as opposed to one person building the schedule and everybody else just sending them like, notes or PDFs or emails and things like that, right? It's all happening in the same collaborative platform. Before Planera, what happened and what people do is they actually write it on a physical whiteboard, take pictures of it, and send it to this one person who then tries to make sense of all of it and put it in the software, right? We eliminate all of that, and we just invite everybody to come on the platform, collaboratively build it on a digital whiteboard. So that's the democratizing part of it. And then while doing that, we don't take away on any of the powerful features, which I'll get to in a second as well. But hopefully that answers your question of how do we democratize things, is by giving them a whiteboard that everyone understands and then letting them collaborate on it freely.
Okay, what happens when there are conflicts, and does at some point, doesn't there kind of need to be some person making the final decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So what ends up happening is, in the early days, you want to be creative, right? You want to see all these ideas. And then as the project plan is progressing, at some point you say, okay, now I'm going to change all of these people's permissions to be commenters only, because now me as a superintendent or me as a project manager, now I need to kind of like get a hold, like control of this thing, right? And so then you can change the permission levels, and then one person maybe starts to make all the decisions, but others can still be in the project, comment, say, hey, I don't think this sequence makes sense. Why don't you change it from here to there, right? So initially, in the initial process, it's a little bit more collaborative and everyone's contributing. And later in the process, it becomes a little bit more structured, right? Where others are commenting and maybe one person's making all the changes.
Okay, great. I think this next question is going to kind of clarify how it goes from kind of a whiteboard into the model. So Planera was recently integrated into Autodesk Construction Cloud. Can you describe how the integration works, how that relationship with Autodesk developed, and how will the overall product help with design and construction?
Autodesk is really great platform for both the design, like the actual design, right? The 3D design, the BIM models, all of that stuff, and then construction management, which is the structured communication happening between various stakeholders. They don't do scheduling. The scheduling is like sort of the third leg of the tripod, right? Construction company, these are the three important things, right? Design, BIM, like how am I going to, like, what are the physical aspects of the job? I need to communicate with everybody, but I need to have a plan, right? And so these are the three important legs of a tripod, according to me. Autodesk understands the importance of this third part, and they also understand that it's very complicated. So you can't do it as a part-time thing on the side. So the partnership made a ton of sense, because we help people create the plans that then they upload, like they integrate that with Autodesk, because that's where all the communication is happening between, say, the headquarters and the field people and the subcontract trade partners and the owner, right? And so people want to visualize the schedule and communicate that can keep happening in Autodesk, while the actual creation and updating of the schedule happens inside Planera. And so that's a very natural fit for both companies. And now with this integration, people who work inside the Autodesk cloud, the build platform, they don't have to leave the build platform to come into Planera to make some changes and then put it back into Autodesk. Now Planera experience can run inside the Autodesk experience, right? And so you could be in Autodesk, and through the integration card, you can launch Planera, look at certain things, maybe even make some updates, and go back working on your Autodesk in the Autodesk environment. So it's a much more seamless experience, and much more sort of integrated.
So if someone's working with Autodesk Cloud, they're kind of like, you'll notice when you're kind of leaving the design platform and in order to work on the scheduling, whether it says Planera or not, and then you go back. It's not like you're on like the same page as when you're doing the design.
That's right. It's different environments because design requires its own complex workflows, scheduling requires its own complex workflows, but you're still in the Autodesk environment. But then you say, hey, I want to work on the schedule, and Planera takes like most of the UI, but the Autodesk overall UI is still there. So you can be like, okay, now I'm done with the schedule part. Now I want to jump to the RFI part, or I want to jump to the submittal part, right? And so all of those things you can quickly switch from one to another without leaving Autodesk environment, right? But when you're into scheduling, you like scheduling is like 90% of the real estate of the screen, but you can quickly back and forth flip between, say, scheduling versus RFI versus submittals, and so on and so forth.
Okay, great. So now I want to kind of switch back to the larger ideas that our readers can learn from. And I believe from this discussion, it's going to be scheduling. So how much importance should engineers focus on scheduling in terms of their overall work?
A lot. The reason is because, as I said earlier, right, construction scheduling is like laws of physics apply. There's like, if you get that wrong, it's very, very hard to recover from it later, right? Even when a plan is perfectly thought out, bad things happen, right? Weather happens, site conditions happen, permits come late, stuff's constantly changing, right? But and you have to react to it, right? So there's both, like upfront, you have to do a really, really good job, because if you don't and you get nasty surprises later, you're just not going to be able to recover from it. So I'll give you an example. We had a project on our platform. It's a fairly large project. It's publicly known now. It's a wastewater treatment plant. And without Planera, they had a schedule in mind, but they hadn't like fully analyzed it. When they put it inside Planera, added some number of resources and started analyzing it, they realized they had these spikes, right? There were months when they needed more equipment than they had, and then there were like 2-3 months when there was this dead time. Both of those are a problem because they wouldn't have realized until 12 months into the project that, damn, I need to rent this third piece of equipment. I only have two, right? My plan calls for three. Now you're suddenly going into cost escalations, right? And you have to eat the cost. Well, and what about these 3 months that the equipment's idling? I cannot demobilize it and mobilize it again. So there's this other cost that I have to carry, right? And so they did a lot of what if analysis. They were able to reduce the spike. They were able to account for the dead time. There was still some dead time, but now that was accounted in the bid, right? And so they saved money both ways, right? Which is not having to pay for the third equipment and being able to account for it. Both of them would have been nasty surprises later in the process, right? And so this is one example. There's just like hundreds of such examples of you'll be able to recover from it, no doubt about it, but it's going to cost you a lot, right? If you don't plan for it upfront.
And I would think in addition to, financial costs, there'd be like sustainability issues of increased energy usage and materials, right?
Sustainability issues because of idling equipment and things of that nature. Safety issues. Our customers actually report to us that better scheduling results in better safety, because with bad scheduling, what happens is everything gets compressed in the back end, right? And then there's just so much stress on the back end. You might not have enough safety inspectors because you're suddenly spiking in terms of your crew size. One customer realized that in these 4 months of the project, they have more high altitude work going on than they had safety inspectors. Well, now that they knew, they were able to account for it and have more safety inspectors in place because they had a 4-5 month kind of a advance notice, right? Otherwise, you're starting to cut corners and take chances. So money, sustainability, and safety. These are all things are improved by better scheduling and planning.
As the expert, if you could provide one key piece of advice to engineers looking to improve their work and benefit their firms through better construction scheduling, what would that advice be?
For 25 years, people have felt like the only way to do scheduling is through Oracle P6, which is a great piece of software, but extremely hard, very, very difficult to use. I would say look around, right? Not just Planera. There's other people who are trying to modernize this space as well. And so just like every other part of their work has gotten modernized, it's time for them to also think about modernizing scheduling and planning, just because how important it is to again, their bottom line and their safety and environmental impact, right? Probably in that order. And so I would like for them to look at Planera, but there's other options there as well. There's just no reason to kind of like not think about modernizing it. For far too long, people have just kind of assumed that the only way to do it is through this old piece of software. No, there's other ways, and it's going to have very, very positive ROI very quickly in their business. Another part of scheduling is risk, right? Risk quantification. In a construction project, every construction project has a risk register, right? Here are the 20 risks that could happen. Maybe 10 or 15 of them are not schedule related. Maybe they're material costs, fuel costs, things like that. But even if there are 3 to 5 things that are schedule related, it's important to quantify it, right? And today, a lot of these project teams don't quantify that, right? Because there's no tools to do it, right? So they just kind of make a guess. These modern tools like Planera, they can now very quickly run a risk scenario, right? Hey, what if this happens? What if there are 20 bad weather days every winter? What if this happens? What if that happens? And now they can quantify very precisely what the impact of a certain risk event could be. Now executives can have a much more informed discussion, right? Hey, okay, what's the probability of this risk? What do we do? So certainly schedule now has an executive use case, right? Which is to run the business and manage risk properly. And that's another one of those things that theoretically everybody knows they should do it. They've never been able to practically do it, right? And we allow users to do risk analysis in a matter of minutes, not weeks or months. And so when people think of schedule, that's the other thing that they need to think about, is these catastrophic events that executives worry all day, every day about.